What's up, everybody? Welcome to Undisciplined by Design. This is a show where we talk with innovation leaders from across the country about their approaches to driving innovation and creating the future. Today, we're talking with Ryan Baum. He's a partner at Silicon Valley-based innovation consultancy, Jump Associates. Ryan's going to talk with us about the importance of staying future-focused, even in times of uncertainty. So let's dive in and see what's next. Well, hey, Ryan, thanks for having us here.
Yeah, of course.
We've been to Jump a few times. This feels like kind of a familiar place for us, but it's always fun to be here. So thanks for having us. And I think we're pretty excited to hear some of your thoughts on the times that we're in and how being future focused really matters, even in times where things feel uncertain. So, but before we dive into that, in case somebody hasn't heard of Jump before, can you tell us a little about, what Jump is, who you are, and then the type of work you do? And then also let's hear about you and your background and your role here.
Sure. Yeah. So Jump, we're a strategy and innovation consulting firm. So we spend our time pretty much exclusively helping companies figure out new ways to grow, right? And our take on growth, there are a lot of organizations who talk about like growth and helping companies from a business strategy perspective. Our take on that is you really need to take a more future-focused approach in general when you're doing that. A lot of companies are very good at sort of helping you hone in on the really rigorously analyzing today, which is an excellent thing to do to make business decisions. But when the times are changing as quickly as they are, sometimes it gives you a very high fidelity rear view mirror of what has happened up to this point. And you end up being like, well, Disney Plus has been successful and Apple Plus has been successful. So CNN, you should launch CNN Plus, right? As opposed to like, there might be some real good reasons why both the future does not need that, and that might not be right for that organization. So helping companies figure out, a lot of companies are trying to figure out how they don't end up like a Blockbuster or a BlackBerry missing the future. And so a lot of our work helps organizations try and figure out those kinds of things. How do we grow? How do we move forward when times are rapidly changing around us?
Okay. High fidelity rear view. I like that.
You don't want that. I mean sometimes
like
you might want that. You don't want that though.
Yeah, but I like that as a term because it is true. And I think you're setting up a stark contrast to traditional business strategy consulting, like you said. And I can think of, we don't need to name names, but I can think of the company.
We can name, you want to go ahead? Go ahead, name names.
No, that wouldn't be appropriate, right? You could, right? But yeah, they come in with a slick deck and a lot of data. But you're right; it very often lacks vision. It's very factual in terms of what the data is saying, but it's maybe not got the vision for the future. And that's I think you did a great job explaining that. My perception has always been that you all are really focused on what could we envision together for the future.
Yeah, new solutions that are going to help you actually do something different, or how to shift the business model. Because a lot of the problems that organizations are facing, sometimes they feel like incredibly existential and very forward, that's very top of mind for organizations. If you're in the, right now, if you're in the health insurance industry, you are really wondering, your business model maybe is working okay, but like everything surrounding that is not working particularly well, and you got to make some massive shifts to really live into the future of both what society is looking for as well as what regulators are looking for. So these kinds of bigger questions that have, oftentimes I work on the problems that have these ecosystem challenges like financial services or healthcare or airlines or these things where it's like 50 different players and nobody really wants to work in them from an innovation perspective because they're really hard to get anything done in. But I like them because I think they can make massive impact if you can do it right.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's fine. So you go where other people are afraid to go.
Well, that's a nice way of saying it. Yeah. Or I'm just a glutton for punishment, I guess.
Could be that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. And so in your role here as a partner?
So I'm a partner at Jump, which basically means I spend my days advising executives on how to stay ahead of a world that's changing very rapidly around them. You asked about my background. I did work in management consulting right out of college. I worked in sort of the more traditional management consulting field. And I realized that was not, it was great. It was very academically interesting and I felt like I was solving problems, but a lot of times I was like, this is management consulting. What is the advice I should be giving to management? And a lot of times the advice I was giving was like how to make the business more efficient, which is great and can be helpful, or how to sell the thing you have a little bit better, or those kinds of questions. And I was really trying to figure out what are the organizations out there? Like who in the world is trying to help organizations figure out like what new things to bring to the world, right? And that's how, interestingly, I made the non-traditional leap, especially at the time, of jumping into the design world and working at a design firm for a period of time. But neither of those felt quite right. The management consulting firm, I was always the one who had who did these weird creative side projects that nobody really understood. And at the design firm, I was the one looking and being like, how does this make business sense? Or programming an Excel workbook to be able to identify a financial model associated with the thing, right? And that's how, about 16 years ago, I found my way to Jump, which was one of the few places at the time that I felt was doing a really excellent job of blending those two worlds, trying to figure out how to think about things through the lens of like what could possibly be, but also how does this actually make financial or business sense for an organization to do, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then I can picture it. A lot of people who haven't looked at the website maybe can't, but this triumvirate, kind of the overlap and Venn that you all talk about a lot, which is, what are the three parts of it?
We talk about social science. So for me, that's like I teach a class at Stanford all about how do you study people and figure out what they need beyond what they can tell you so that you can build new products and services. So there's the social science side. There's the design side, which is basically being able to invent and think about new things. And the design side actually overlaps these days a lot more with the technology side, right? So we call that part of it design and technology. And then the other one's business strategy, being able to think like an entrepreneur, being able to build a reverse income statement, think about the financial implications of something, the competitive environment, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and you all have the expectations that everybody here can do those things. We're not looking for you to just be the whatever person.
Yeah. It's not like you're going to toss it over the fence. That's the problem corporate America has, right? Is that they have the insights team, the design or R&D team, and then the like commercialization team, and so much gets lost in that translation when you pass it over the fence. That we do have an expectation that those things need to exist in the same brain. Otherwise, it's very hard to solve many of the bigger problems that are facing organizations today.
Yeah. I just felt like it would be amiss to not shamelessly talk about that on a podcast called Undisciplined by Design.
There you
right?
go.
So thanks for indulging me there on that one. But yeah. Well, we've alluded to this a little bit. Here we are in late spring, early summer 2025. And things are feeling a lot uncertain in a lot of fronts, right? For various reasons. You could argue that it's chaotic at its worst, and at minimum, though, it's uncertain.
Yeah.
And this could be a time when people would say, okay, let's just batten down the hatches and sit tight until we see what happens and ride this out.
Yeah. Many people are doing that.
True. I guess instead of saying it could be, there are a lot of people who are doing that,
yes.
right? The argument could also be made, if you're future focused, that that would be a mistake. And I think would love to hear your take on this. I'm sure there's a lot of things you have to say about this because this is your world. So wherever you think we should start with that.
Yeah. I mean, I generally look, being smart about when you make decisions and not jumping the gun on something that is some crazy new future thing that maybe makes no sense in the current environment. I see why organizations are doing that, but it has been interesting to watch. So some of the things that I love that are really interesting that I see is like, I remember a few weeks ago, United Airlines came out and they were one of the first companies to say, well, if we enter a recession, this is our guidance. And if we don't enter a recession, this is our guidance, right? And so they're like, you all figure it out. We're as uncertain as you about what the future is going to look like, but we know it could go this way or it could go this way. And here are two completely different, companies don't do that. They put out their financial guidance for Wall Street and say, here's what we're gonna be. So that was to me a very interesting moment of showing, hey, might be a different way that we need to think about what's going on right now. We do see a lot of cost cutting right now. We do see a lot of pulling back on hiring right now. We do see probably sentiment, there's all these financial institutions that put out surveys to all their clients and things like that about how confident are you in, making decisions, and that's at an all-time low, right? All those kinds of things we definitely are seeing right now. And for us, I spend a lot of time talking to execs, and many of them are just trying to figure out how to get their organizations to start moving into action, because we probably more naturally default to talking to some of the more future-focused folks, right? That's just sort of the bias of the folks who we often interact with. But even many of them are having a lot of trouble making decisions that would have taken, 2 or 3 months before are now taking like a year before they actually come to pass. And so it's a lot harder of an environment for people. People are clamming up because of the uncertainty, I think.
Yeah. And what's the potential cost of that, though?
I mean, the cost is huge, right? I mean, if you think about it, right, even if you look back at like COVID or the financial crisis that happened in 2008 or like past recessions, right? I think many of I can't remember, it's somewhere like 40 or 50% of the Fortune 500 or something like that were started in a recession or something. There's some amazing statistic like that. I don't actually remember. I probably shouldn't say that on a media program where it's going to be cited, but I believe that you could look it up. I'm sure.
There we go.
Do we have a fact checker here? I'm sure there's a fact checker.
Ask ChatGPT.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think a lot of organizations are founded, and that because constraints can lead to the strengthening of a company. But I think you do notice that a lot of companies I don't know. I remember like reading a lot about Lego coming out of the 2008 crisis because I think they came out of the 2008 crisis stronger than they'd ever been, right? Which is shocking for a company that seems like theoretically could be frivolous, entertainment, right? But they had gone through a crisis of their own in 2004 that nobody else was, where their margins were the lowest that they ever were. And so they were sort of almost like when it hit, they were like, it's okay. Like we've already been through hell, so we're gonna like invest now. Yeah. And they invested and came out the other side a lot stronger. And I do think that organizations that can find a way to take action and move through this time can be successful. But it's really hard to figure out how to do that because there's so much turbulence and it becomes very hard to figure out what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to, right? Because a lot of the things that are going on right now are blips or they're distractions of this moment in time. And a lot of things are actually longer term signals and trends that we should be paying attention to. Yeah. But distinguishing between those two and then actually taking action is can be very difficult.
Yeah, you're starting to speak foresight language now. This is kind of like this. We got signals and trends. I'm here for it. No, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that's what's interesting about it is you mentioned that word blip versus was it blips and distractions? Blips and distractions,
I think, are today. Our Dave, who's one of my partners and our CEO at Jump, talks about the difference between moments and momentum.
Okay.
Right. And moments are there are a lot of things that are happening right now, right? That might be like, things like tariffs or those kinds of things. But there has been momentum that has been happening for a while of like nationalistic, nationalism, right? And basically a lot of folks have said, if we were all paying attention, we would have noticed that there is a lot more talk about shutting down of international borders. Not quite as hard as maybe they are being shut down right now, but there has been this trend toward, a lot of companies have started doing more domestic production and things like that because they've noticed this sort of signs that are going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the things that are momentum versus the things that are moments, the things that are these blips versus the things that are sort of the longer term things that you should be paying attention to, it's really important to distinguish between those two if you're going to be able to make some progress.
Yeah. Well, and it's a fair thing to do if you're trying to lead a company. You're trying to, even if you're not leading the whole company, if you're responsible for a group of people or a product line, you can't help but perhaps naturally default to protect what I've got. How do I kind of batten down the hatches? But there's probably some value in taking practical steps to not do that as well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, like we a few years ago, we were working with a company in the music industry, right? And for them, there's all kinds of disruption. The music industry has had quite a few disruptions. They've been through their fair share of disruptions over the course of the past, let's call it 10 years.
Yeah, maybe even depending on which disruption you're talking 20 about. Years, we can go back. I remember Napster.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, like it's just been again and again and again and again, right? And one of the things that's more momentum thing, it's more of a like this is ongoing thing that was really important for them is is how much artists are going to matter in the future. And I say that as somebody who like loves music and cares deeply about artists and all that kind of stuff. But if you think about it, we have been on a trend toward artists not actually having the same kind of impact that they had culturally for a long time, right? And there are exceptions, like folks like Taylor Swift who have big national presence. But, you know, if I were to say, you know, what was the soundtrack of like the anti-Vietnam era? Like you could probably name a bunch of songs from, you know, whatever, Buffalo Springfield, all kinds of songs, right?
Yeah.
But then if I were to ask you like, hey, what was the soundtrack of like the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter or anything like that? There's not that same kind of, oh, it was this. Like this was, so culturally, in the same way that like we're all sitting around the water cooler talking about TV shows, you know, what the latest what happened on Black Mirror or something like that, in a way that it's different with music. It used to be like that. But also simultaneously, when people are thinking about, you know, what they want to listen to even these days and going on to a service like Spotify or Apple Music or one of those, a lot more these days they're saying like, you know what, I just want like some energy, pump me up music. And they put on that playlist and it plays a whole bunch of stuff. And some of that will maybe be by somebody you know, but 90% of it probably isn't. And Spotify's incentivized to have all that music made by AI so they could pay as little as possible anyway. So all of a sudden it becomes more difficult. So you have to think about, how certain are we about what's going to happen? Are we going to move to a world where artists still matter, like what is happening in the Taylor Swift version of this, or what is happening in the sort of Spotify version of this, and be able to think about how to plan for what might work as a music company, regardless of which of those futures comes to pass.
Yeah.
Right. And so those kinds of activities, if you're looking, you're sort of playing out, and I know you talk a lot about futures and things like that and scenarios and those kinds of things. One way to start to play in this time of, man, it's hard to figure out what to pay attention to and how to take action during this time, is to just force yourself to play out a couple versions of what could happen and see what might work regardless.
Okay. So what's that look like, playing out a version? I know in my mind what that is and having an archetype and building rules for that world, but maybe that's too advanced for somebody who's just dabbling in this. So like, we got two paths we can go down, play them out. How far do you go and how wild do you get?
What I love to, I mean, what we will do, like if we're doing work with a company, we'll get fairly wild.
Yeah.
Well, because you have to push toward the fringes to actually, even if everything about you is telling you that's never going to happen, it's a good moment to try and play it out and see what that's going to look like. But even if the best thing to do is think about, if this were to happen, what would we do, right? And if this were to happen, what would all of our competitors do? We call it wargaming out different versions of the future, right? And then think about what works in various different, what are the things that are the most likely to work, and try those things, right?
Yeah.
Because some of the things are going to feel like no regrets. They work in all the different worlds. And if that's true, then there shouldn't really be something holding you back in this moment from doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge component of ways that you can start to take some action.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys might use this language too, but we'll talk a lot of times about there's a preferred future, and that's the one that's the easiest to say, like, well, of course, all these things will come together into this, but you also need to, at minimum, explore the plausible.
Yeah.
And then go as far as the possible, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know if you all use language like that, or
sometimes. I mean, for us, I think the biggest thing is there's a very small percentage of the population who likes thinking like this, who likes actually thinking about how things are going to change and what could like totally disrupt the way that we operate moving forward. And the trick, if you're leading an organization, it's not just figuring out smart strategies. It's getting the rest of the organization to actually pay attention or act in that way too, and not just totally write it off as crazy BS, right? And I think that part of the reason why we do things that are a little more involved, we'll actually sort of build out these worlds and have people live in rooms that are like built out like that world, such that people can play along with this game, is because it gives people a visceral sense of what could happen, right? And to your other point, some of those worlds, you want to feel very traditional, normal, just like a continuation of what exists today.
Yeah.
Because then you can say like, yep, we got that thing you're thinking about. It's right here. Let's try this other one too and see what might work in both of those situations, right? And when you talk about it like future proofing or something like that, it feels like risk mitigation. It's a lot easier for organizations to swallow. And when you have things that are a little bit more like today, or things that we feel like we could totally win in because we know how, it becomes a lot more palatable too.
Yeah. It's one of the things we talk about a lot is like, you should never build a scenario where there's a guaranteed winner or loser. There should always be both, right? That makes a lot of sense. We just did a big event at the end of our year to kind of showcase all of our research, and had identified these 4 major forces of change, and then within those, the drivers, and what are the signals that support those. And one of the things we really wanted to do with that was invite people in to try and stretch their thinking. And so we did a lot of things to kind of make them think about themselves in the year 2030, 2035, and 2040. And so even as you walked around and navigated this world, on the floor, there were stickers like, in the year 2040, I'll be blank years old. In the year 2040, I'll probably live blank, right? And these things that kind of make it feel like, okay, I'm living in this now, so then what is plausible and possible?
Totally. Yeah. That's great. I mean, then the more you can make it feel like a further out version of like, this is the business meeting we're going to be having at this moment. And we're trying to like actually argue out what's going to happen, because part of the whole benefit of it is actually just preparing yourself to be aware of the things that might happen along the way that push you and be like, hey, this is what we should be doing.
Yeah. Now, the work that you're leading at Jump right now, is a lot of that in the health space? Is that true?
I mean, it's a mix, but I do a lot of I lead our healthcare work.
Yeah. And would you say that that's an area that's, uncertain and disrupted right now too?
For sure. I mean, right now, everybody is pretty well aware, I think, of the, murder of Brian Thompson that happened. And so like the health insurance industry is in somewhat trying to figure out how to make sense and what to do about some of those kinds of things. I think also when you think about sort of some of the regulatory environment that's happening around healthcare right now, things are very much shifting as, government is sort of contracting in a lot of different departments. There's question about what things are going to look like for the future of Medicare or things like that, right? And at the same time, we're facing nursing shortages, and it's just like all these kinds of crazy forces are sort of impacting that space right now in a way that's making it pretty difficult to. I mean, I think when it comes to fixing some of the stuff that there's a lot of stuff that I, as a patient in the system, not I as a person working with these organizations, but I as a patient in the system look at and I'm like, how on earth did this ever come to pass? And like the complicated bureaucracy that so it becomes very hard to change anything in those moments. But some of the things are very obvious that need to change, and I think some of the things are probably a little bit deeper. Right.
Yeah. And so when we take something that complicated, I know before we were talking about, okay, we play out some scenarios, we build worlds. When you've got something as complicated as a healthcare system, and there's some things that are constrained and maybe can't change no matter what, do you think if somebody is trying to get into dabble in being more future focused, should they pick one thing, one part of that system to just focus on that? Or is it better to go ahead and accept the chaos of the larger system and kind of just explore that whole thing together and maybe not get as far and deep?
Yeah, great question. The as opposed to all your other questions, which have been terrible.
Okay,
no, I'm just
kidding.
Yes.
I needed some validation.
I hate it when people say
That's,
great question because it means like, oh, that one was good. Or it means I don't know the answer and I have to think about it and stall for a moment. I do know the answer.
You just bought some more time there too, actually.
What I will say, so we are currently doing some foresight work in the healthcare space, and I actually think that it's really interesting. I think that over the course of the past 30, 40 years, it has been hammered into executives, the idea of thinking about scenarios, right? So a lot of folks do think, well, what would happen if government regulators in my state decided to nationalize health insurance, or what would happen if more nurses flooded the system? But typically they're thinking along one specific business oriented vector.
Okay.
That is, and they're like, if the the government does this, this will happen, versus if the government does this, this will happen, right? And so then they can sort of plan for that. But the problem is that might be an important vector, but it doesn't give you a sense of what the world's going to look like in that moment, right? It gives you a sense of it's a very thoughtful, smart, but narrow decision-making mechanism for how to address a specific challenge as opposed to how to envision how things might significantly shift. Because the truth is, like, regulation for government is going to impact how healthcare is delivered, but also the fact that, there is a massive divide right now between wealthy folks and poor folks. And if that gets worse and worse and worse, then all of a sudden, all of these products that sort of are designed for folks in the middle are not going to have really anyone to serve, right? And so, it's hard to think about the regulation without that or that without the regulation. You need to think about it across a bunch of different vectors. So typically, I think thinking narrowly can be really helpful if you want to try to play out a specific vector, but it's also helpful to zoom out and think about how do we future-proof the business more from a broader perspective. And there, it's hard to do that without at least taking a initial glance at a broad set of forces that could impact you. Usually, many of the ones that are going to really come up and hit you are not the ones that you're immediately paying attention to anyway now. So it's useful to spend some time thinking about those too.
Yeah, that's something that we find in our practice as well, that it'd be easy to overlook, is to look in the analogous categories or to look in the adjacent. Maybe it's not even analogous, but it's it's not in our domain. But what's happening outside of our domain, that's a signal that something like this could happen in our domain if there's enough similarities to it. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And I think that, whether it will or not, I think that is a really critical way to think about things. But also, all of this, for a lot of organizations, the ones I think that where it's easier to take some action in moments of uncertainty, it is when you have a clear idea of who you are and what you're shooting for and some vision. If you have a vision, we were talking to some folks at a large retailer, and they were talking a lot about tariffs because tariffs are going to significantly impact the retail environment. But they were like, yeah, we have our small team who's off on thinking about tariffs, as opposed to many companies who everyone at the company is freaking out about tariffs. They're yeah, we have a small team who's thinking about tariffs right now. And the rest of us are keeping our eye on the prize, right? We have this vision for what we're trying to do, and we know that is things are going to come and go, and we have to make sure we have cash and we can operate and all that kind of stuff. But we need to maintain clarity for what we're trying to do in the world, and it's easier to make decisions. It's easier to make progress when you have that sense of clarity of where you're headed and what you want, right? Yeah. I remember for years. We worked with Target years ago on trying to help them figure out that their purpose as an organization is to help all families discover the joy of everyday life, right? And if you have something like that, if you can align and focus on that, it can be really helpful and clarifying from a decision-making perspective. Now, when you have to adjust to competitive threat and all those kinds of things, sometimes you can stray from that, which Target has done a little bit over the course of the past few years, and they're in a tricky spot right now. But I do think things like clarity of vision helps make all of the decisions a little bit easier because you have a sense for this is where we're heading, this is the kinds of things that we want to be doing.
So yeah, if I distill that down to another actionable thing, you're giving us a lot of good actionable things here, and one of them I'm hearing. So yeah, great answer, by the way, on that one.
As opposed to the other ones.
Yes, that was too easy. I had to go there. But the actionable thing here is not getting caught up in the chaos, right? Accept the chaos, but also remember that there is a world after the chaos that you want to still exist in. And so let's not lose sight of that for the sake of just reacting to today.
Totally. And it's hard to call that actionable because it's don't get caught up in the chaos. It's okay, what the hell am I supposed to do? I'm running a business here. But it is, I do think that is right in that, okay, a lot of times we will we'll work with organizations to help them develop a vision for whatever, the future of their business. It could be the future of how e-commerce is going to work in music, or the future of like what health insurance is going to look like in the future, or like, or what tablets are going to look like, and whatever, future of something, right? Like, and usually our recommendation to them is most organizations do not deal well with abstraction and do not deal well with vision, right? Like it just is something that is very hard for organizations to engage with. Instead, take a page from the playbook of the auto industry, right? So the auto industry every year has a big trade show. It's an auto show. And everybody shows up to that auto show and they bring their concept car, right? This is not a car that is like ready for production or is even planned for production. It's a car that is more a vision than anything else, right? It is like, this is what we believe about the future of transportation. And you can see it in concrete details by the decisions we've made here. Is it road ready? No. Is it factory production ready? No. But this is what we're shooting for. And that gives people, that takes this ethereal concrete, like we care about safety and we care about the environment and we're going to make eco-friendly cars that are safe and have really good like seat harness technology, to like, it could be like this. Is it going to be like this in 10 years when this type of thing actually comes out? No, definitely not. But it's going to be close to this, right? And I think that idea of, we talk a lot about the idea of a concept car instead of a specific vision, right? And if you have that, then people can point to that and say like, hey, this decision that I need to make right now that I'm feeling a lot of uncertainty and hesitancy about, like, because I don't know what's going to happen with tariffs and this and that, is it moving us toward that or away from that?
Okay.
And all of a sudden it becomes easier to actually start to make decisions and move in the direction that the company starts to align around, all marching in the same direction. And this is helpful probably even in times of relative stability, but it's really helpful in times of turmoil.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the concept car, the concept of the concept car.
The concept
right?
of the concept
yeah.
car. Yes. Yeah, it's really important, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're on a good pathway here towards these actionable things. Are there even lower hanging fruit than that as far as actionable things we can do, tools people can use? You know, I mean, we've talked a little bit about AI sometimes. It's like, well, it's here. What are we going to do with this?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's a way to actionably do something.
Sure.
Think differently.
Yeah. I mean, AI is great. I mean, if nothing else, people are still investing and thinking about AI, and that makes them feel like they're future focused. That makes them feel like they're doing something about the future because they're doing something with AI, which is great. I mean, it is good. It maybe is a little bit of a red herring for many organizations, but it is critical. It is a critical thing to be focusing on and spending time on, right? One of the best in this moment, there's so many good applications of AI, but for many people who are sort of sitting with a ChatGPT subscription or whatever, or choose the AI of your liking, and trying to figure out how to use this to move forward. I mean, many folks have recognized that the fear of the blank page is another thing that sort of gets in the way of inaction, right? Like, I just don't know how to get started on something. And there have been all these studies about if you just say, like, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes and then see what happens. And normally people say, like, I'm forcing myself to do something for 5 minutes, even if I don't want to do it. And then if I do that, I will actually probably make a significant amount of progress. And you can trick your brain in those kinds of ways to being able to make progress on things that you feel very uncertain about or don't know what you want to do. And you just need to get started and get something down on paper. For that, I think AI is an excellent tool, right? Like, AI is excellent at getting you past that first initial like fear of the blank page motion and into some sort of decision or action. Like, even if it's just you're asking, hey, what do you think about this, or whatever it might be, it's a really good tool for that. Now, you gotta be a little careful because we've all been reading about like glazing and all the stuff that's happening with AI around. It basically just is a new form of confirmation bias because it tells you how brilliant you are all the time and agrees with all your opinions.
Yeah.
But I think it is an excellent tool for doing some of that.
I mean, it could be a way to concept out the concept car, right? I mean,
it could certainly be a way to start, right? I think, right? To me, in the class that I teach, we talk a lot about the difference between pain points versus like deeper needs and mindsets, right?
Okay.
And pain points are sort of like, a lot of organizations have incredibly efficient and effective like NPS listening stations and things like that raise that are like, here are all the problems that people have, and they can aggregate them and put them together and say like, we need to solve this, 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 and this. And those things, by the way, are great things to solve, right? But typically, those things are very much of today and this moment. It doesn't mean you shouldn't solve them. Like, of course, you need to solve the things that are pissing people off about your business or your organization. But a lot of times those pain points change relatively quickly as the conditions on the ground change. And there are other things like needs or mindsets which change a whole lot slower, like the deeper needs that people have about like, how do I approach, the example that we sometimes give in class, in this class that I teach is, we tell people to design a ladder, in which case they'll like fix all the things. It has a wider base and there's electricity plug-in at the top. You're fixing features on it versus the need of helping to reach stuff that's up high, right? And if you can work on some of those, all of a sudden those things change a lot less frequently. Like if a ladder changes or something new comes out, the pain points flex, right? But if the needs sort of remain. So in this moment when things are turbulent, if you can focus more on sort of the deeper needs that people have or the mindsets, the way that they see the world, and sort of addressing and adjusting to those as opposed to just the pain points, it can be really helpful. Now, bringing that back to the actual question you asked, AI, I think, is a lot better at figuring out some of the pain points because that's what we talk more about. And so sometimes it can be great, but I think oftentimes that can be great for like a little bit of a shorter term fix to something. I remember I was at a conference and there were folks from, I think it was Clorox, talking about how AI was they had basically fired all their innovation people and replaced it with AI. And they were coming up with like better, they ran tests about like AI versus humans in terms of like, and they're like, these ones were more creative and there were a lot more of them and there were ideas and this and all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking to myself, like, how are you judging it and what kinds of things are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because, and a lot of it was, again, it was really useful fixes. Like the stuff that AI was coming up with was smart and thoughtful, but it was adjustments. It was like charcoal that gave off a scent when or something like, it was like those kinds of like tweaks to exist. Because I think the pain point stuff is really good. But if you're trying to set a vision about where we're headed over the course of the next 5 to 7 years, like it shouldn't be charcoal that has sense to it. Yeah. It's a good immediate term thing, maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
It's not setting off a new category. AI is not going to do that in response to a human need that wasn't articulated directly.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that you come up with an entirely new category or something. Like the car that shows up at the auto show is still a car, right?
Yeah.
Right. But it's putting out a point of view about like transportation mobility is going to look a little bit different and they may not be the things that people would tell you, right? Like if we keep it in the auto world, it's the faster horse quote, right?
Yeah.
Right. So.
Should we say the faster horse quote, I guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right. If I had asked people, we could do it in unison probably, right?
If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Great. Right, yeah, nice exactly. But it is that idea of the things that people can articulate typically are those pain points, which are the shorter term things that are the things that flex relatively quickly. And part of the reason why people are when people are like, I don't want to listen to customers, I have a better idea. A lot of times I think that's, it's arrogance and foolish, but it's probably because if you just fix the pain points, you are going to get a faster horse, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that there's some element of to me, there needs to be some deeper conversation or some synthesis or some social science that exists to really figure out what those things are. So,
yeah.
But focusing on needs, use AI to get past the blank page. Those are all still good principles.
Yeah, and those a lot of these same things would be good advice in times of uncertainty or in times of plenty, right?
Totally, yeah. Absolutely. And, for many folks, the voice inside their head saying like, I shouldn't even do something right now because like it's all going to change tomorrow or because or whatever, it's there, right? And so having a tool or something that can just like, well, what would I do if I did do something? Like it can help you. It can help, and you can use AI to do that. You can use a thought partner to do that. You could use a journal to do that. Whatever it might be, it can help you start to just feel. You don't have to do anything about it. Just take some action, right? And feel a little bit more. Sometimes I struggle with like, how much like control do I have over anything, really, right? Like. And I need to take some action in order to remind myself that I do have some agency.
Yeah. Okay.
over things.
Yeah.
So,
Kind of pull the head up a little bit out of the sand,
Exactly.
or the headlines you're reading, whatever it may be. Focus on a vision. Go for a walk, maybe. I don't know. Right.
Yeah. Totally. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to dive into?
Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about in this moment is the idea of a lot of companies think about the sort of short-term changes versus the long-term changes as like separate things, and they manage them very differently. And sort of they require a different set of management. But when you're looking at your portfolio of stuff that you have, it's really important that you have some combination of stuff that is a little bit shorter term and a little bit longer term. And if you find that because of the urgency of the moment, your purview or your focus is really on just the short-term stuff, you need to recognize that you're managing a portfolio here. You're not just managing the actions or the day-to-day actions of something. And sort of you're simultaneously working on both of those things. Sometimes we tell organizations that are really that are really focused on sales and commercialization, and they're very good at that. We'll say like, manage the new the same way you'd manage a sales funnel, right? Like, you have some stuff that's way up at the top, like, boy, we think sustainability stuff is going to be huge, right? And then you have some stuff that's way down at the bottom, like almost at sale, which is like, we came up with this new business that's like ready to launch right now, right? And like this stuff has like massive market associated with it. It's like billions of dollars, but you're like a 1% likelihood of any of that ever making it through to something that you buy. And then this stuff that's way down here on the other end is like a lot smaller market, but you have probably like a 60 to 70% chance of actually making it a success, right? And then use that as a way, everything in between, look at all the stages so that you can manage everything like a funnel.
Yeah.
And then you can look at the health of all the different, like you use that as like a dashboard for yourself and look at the health of the various different stages of things. And if you find yourself focusing your attention entirely down here, again, for a period of time, for a quarter where things are crazy and, like immediately after COVID hit, like people needed to figure out, wait, how do I actually get people to stand 6 feet apart from each other in the grocery line or whatever it is, right? Like it makes sense, right? But if for too long you find yourself exclusively focused down there, or conversely, if for too long you find yourself focused exclusively up at the top, you're probably not managing it well from a portfolio perspective. And so, again, thinking about ways to get yourself into action, it's sometimes what you measure is how you act, right? And so, if you are looking at if you're looking at that portfolio as a dashboard for yourself on a regular basis, and you're sort of managing it like that, it can help you know, I'm not taking action on some of this or this, right? And it can help prompt you to do so. So,
no, that's a good word. Managing your portfolio. It's diversifying your portfolio.
Exactly,
right?
right? Just like finance.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, you've given lots of great examples of how this can happen and good advice. Sometimes you got to eat your own dog food, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you've already covered this, but what are you doing personally to manage uncertainty? Oh, man.
So a few things. So some of it is we are very much, we are doing that sort of scenario work, right? Like, so for ourselves, we actually did a version of that scenario work a few years ago that helped us make a bunch of decisions about what to do that we're starting to, focused on like AI, and a lot of it focuses on a broad set of things, of which some is AI, but now again, there's even a whole renewed version of uncertainty. So we're revisiting, rather than totally redoing, we're revisiting that and seeing how some of it holds up. Okay. So that's one thing, right, that we're certainly doing. Another thing is we are actually shifting some of our offerings a little bit because we're recognizing that in this world where decision making slows down, if decision-making is slowing down internally for organizations, the way they partner with external organizations is also going to slow down. And so we're fully anticipating that things that used to take like a month or two to get started are now going to take 6 months.
Okay.
For our business, right?
Yeah.
To like, if we're like going to do a project together or partner together on something. So that won't impact the deeper relationships we have as much because it might be a little bit easier to activate those. But especially for new stuff, it's going to take a lot longer.
Okay.
And so we're finding smaller entry points where we can help organizations in a different way. So we might have some more like off the shelf stuff that we would have never focused on before because we want to do stuff that's exactly right for you in this kind of way. But like sessions and things like that will help organizations actually get started, and it'll help them because it'll help them start moving more quickly. But it's also easier to just be like, let's go with this thing more quickly, so then we can figure out how to partner down the line, right? And so some things, thinking about product, thinking from a scenario perspective, certainly. I mean, we're spending a ton of time with AI as well, and a lot of it is to get past a blank page, like I was saying, but it's also integrating lots of different parts of our business. And yeah, I mean, we're pretty clear on vision and what we stand for and all those kinds of things. We do a lot of work on that. And so we're pretty consistent with that. So I feel like people are generally marching in the same direction. But a lot of the stuff, we definitely do ourselves, and we're trying to figure out all the alternatives for what it might look like. Like, the future is pretty uncertain. Like, let's be clear. The future is pretty uncertain for professional services firms now, right? Like many of our contemporaries are like cutting headcount left and right and doing all kinds of stuff, right? So it's not even the past year. I mean, I will say there was a study that came out recently that shows that the only people making money currently in the short term in AI are like McKinsey and Accenture and Deloitte. That's all the management consulting firms. So they're doing well on that front, but many of them are, battening down the hatches and cost cutting and preparing for a very uncertain future. We maybe are making we're still hiring and doing that kind of stuff, but we may be making some adjustments to those kinds of things just to be like smart and thoughtful and stage it out. Whereas we may be like, we'll bring in 6 people next quarter or something, as opposed to like, well, let's stage that out a little bit just to see how things play out. We'll make some decisions now, but we're definitely not stopping. Right? And I think that's the key.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because that's kind of where we started this, right? It's like, there's a cost to inaction, and you might be better off taking some actions where some of them don't pan out than you would be just stopping to wait. Yeah.
And this company, it's funny. I mean, like, this company is we're probably like 27 years old, so somewhere in that ballpark. And we are particularly good at having to manage through the crap because over the past few years, like, we've hit like multiple recessions and .com bubbles and like COVID and like I think many business leaders today, including us, are like hearkening back to the era where like we were just on like consistent growth and like the 70s and 80s, right? Anyway, but so we've had to manage through a lot of these things, and I think part of that is why we've had to build the muscle to be able to do that, right? Because it's hard to navigate that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So anybody listening to this arguably could take a cue from building that resilience and recognizing that whatever you live through today, it's going to turn you into something that hopefully does have a future in tomorrow, and you're forged in the fire, right? And then the next time something comes around that's uncertain, you'll say, hey, this is how we did it last time. We survived it. How do we tweak and adjust today?
Totally. And you probably have more agency, especially if you're like leading a Fortune 500 company. But even if you're not, like, you probably have more agency than you think. Like, you don't want to only shoot for one future, because if you're preparing that way, that's not a good way to future-proof your business. Yeah. But it doesn't mean you don't have an opinion about the world, what you want the world to look like, and things that you're fighting for, and clarity around that. And like, this is not a system that just happens to you, right? There are things that you can do. And if you're clear on sort of what that general direction is, you can take action toward it.
That's awesome. Yeah. This is good. This was fun, Ryan. Thanks for just giving us. I think it's a really relevant, timely moment, and I'm glad that we could have this conversation when we are. I mean, here we're sitting in Silicon Valley, and the land of move fast and break things, and things are getting broken all over the place. And
just don't
fast,
break as many things. Yeah. Just let's move fast, but let's try to maybe avoid breaking things.
That's a good word. Awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan. It's always a pleasure to be here. I think it's fun to think about when we met. in New York at Fast Company.
Yeah.
And I think I was in this room maybe 2 months prior and you were out there and didn't know each other existed.
Exactly.
And then we run into each other on a bike tour in New York at Fast Company. I'm
Yeah.
like, wait, you're Cincinnati?
I
What?
think I know you. Yeah.
That was fun.
But man, I love a lot of the stuff y'all are doing out there. I mean, it's from a, as somebody who is also thinking about a lot, like I think a lot about the business world, but I'm also thinking a lot about teaching in the education space and the stuff I do at Stanford. And it is, it's so critical. It's really impressive, some of the cool stuff you're doing. So keep it up.
We will. Thanks, man.
You bet.